Okay, hello everybody, and welcome to the Arctic Field Ecology Information Session. This is a course that we offered last year. We're going to be offering it again this year, and I want to get the word out early. It's a summer course, it's new, and I'd like to let people know what to expect. And so if people are interested, they can prepare, talk to me, and have some idea for what they're in for. So here are the details. It's going to be offered 20th July to the 3rd of August in Churchill, Manitoba, which I'll say more about in a minute. The official name of the course is Biology Field Research, BIO332. But the topic of this course shifts from year to year. And right now we're actually doing an Arctic Field Ecology course. I'm the instructor, Professor Kotanen, Department of Biology here. There's my contact information. We'll make this talk available online somehow after we're done here. But I'll tell you right now, if you need any more information, don't hesitate. Just email me or get in touch and I can tell you what I know. We will be doing several other information sessions. This one's very early, but we will be doing another information session next semester where we have a bit more concrete information. And again, watch for other news and advertising as we get closer to the date. So this is me. I'll just tell you a little bit about myself. I study invasions and plant-herbivore interactions. One of the places I do this is in Churchill, where we're holding the field course. And in fact, I've worked in Churchill periodically since 1984, so it's a place I'm pretty familiar with. I've done a lot of work in the south, but in the north, I've done a lot of work elsewhere in the Hudson Bay, James Bay system as well, including the Kivalliq region up the west coast of Hudson Bay, Akimiski Island in James Bay, Bylot Island in the high Arctic, Southampton Island on the Arctic Circle. So again, Churchill is one of the destinations where I've done Arctic research. So the site will be holding the course in the field at the Churchill Northern Studies Centre. The Study Center is again in the town of Churchill. You can see the red dot on the map there, northern Manitoba, just south of Nunavut. It's a great place for a field station. It's a very modern, comfortable field station. It's only about 10 years old. It hosts a lot of field courses. Last year we were one of them, and again, this year we will be again. The town of Churchill is a town you may probably have heard of. The CNSC is about 25 kilometers east of town, so it's actually out of the edge of the tundra. But it's nice to actually have a town that we can rely on as well. So Churchill's small. It's about 900 residents, but for that latitude, that makes it a big place. It's the biggest town in more than 100 kilometers in any direction. It's got a local airport, also a rail line. I'll say more about that in a minute. It's historically interesting. It was a Hudson Bay Company post starting in 1717, and has been a long place of contact between European and North American cultures. It's a grain port. You're looking at the town there with the grain elevators in the background. And again, it's pretty well equipped to support a field course, even though it's very small. It has a grocery store, hardware store, liquor store, souvenir shops, restaurants. It has a hospital. Again, it's a good base of operations for the course. How do you get there? Well, the first thing about Churchill is there's no road access. In fact, there's no road access anywhere on Hudson Bay. One way you can get to Churchill is to fly. And there are a couple of routes. The standard way is you fly up from Winnipeg to Churchill on Comair International. You can fly to Winnipeg lots of different ways. Comair is a small local airline that runs up from Winnipeg. Be warned, it's not on aggregators like Travelocity or Expedia. You have to book a ticket with them directly. They're still recovering from COVID. They haven't completely restored their pre-COVID schedule yet, but there are currently flights most days of the week. Some are direct, some go through Rankin Inlet in Nunavut, which actually is a bit of a plus. You get an hour or so in Rankin as well. The other way you can get to Churchill is by train. There is one rail link from the south to Hudson Bay. Churchill is it. They do run passenger trains up several days a week from Winnipeg. It's a great trip, but be warned, it's a multi-day experience. Again, it actually takes place over 3 days coming up from Winnipeg. So why do we want to go there? Well, here's the reason. This is a great area. It's right at the edge of the tundra. So right at the boreal tundra interface. So within short distances of the study center, we have excellent quality boreal forest. We also have good quality coastal tundra, like you're looking at on the left. It's in the permafrost zone, so everything's underlain by permafrost. It's a permanently frozen environment. It's got good coastal habitats. We'll be visiting the Churchill estuary and Hudson Bay itself. Lots of wetlands, many lakes. Again, for an Arctic site, it's actually a really diverse place to hold the field course. Just a little more detail. This is what a lot of the vegetation looks like. Dominant trees, there only are a handful of them. Black spruce, white spruce, tamarack, balsam poplar, and you're done. Tundra is mostly dominated by short vegetation. Again, a lot of peatland and sedge fen habitats. Again, you're looking at one of these tundra transitional areas here with a very stunted white spruce in the foreground, a tree that probably is several hundred years of age. Again, set in the matrix of blueberry and bearberry tundra. We also go up there for the wildlife. There's a lot to see in town. First of all, there's a fairly diverse bird community. It's a good area for Arctic and subarctic birds like snow geese, ptarmigan, parasitic Jaegers. These are all things we saw in the course last year. It's also rather good for wildlife. If you know Churchill, it's probably because it's the place that people go to see bears in North America, to see polar bears, and it's a famous polar bear site. I'll warn you right now, this is not a wildlife tour. We don't guarantee wildlife sightings. But on the other hand, we do tend to see a lot of stuff. So this past year, we saw hundreds of beluga whales. We saw caribou, a bunch of Arctic foxes, several polar bears, especially later in the summer is when you got a really good chance of seeing them. I mentioned before, this is also a historic area. For hundreds of years, it's been a contact point between Cree, Dene, Inuit, and Europeans. And happily, there's some good local museums that document this. So I'm hoping we'll get a chance to go to Fort Prince of Wales, which you're looking at here, a huge Hudson Bay Company fort. And again, there also are a number of other local museums and displays where you can look at the history of the region, especially at Inuit art. So how does the course work? Well, this is a field course. So it's an intense course. It's a 2-week course. You don't have a lot of spare time during it. We really pack as much as we can into those 2 weeks. So the way that it works is that we have local trips daily for the first half of the course, usually in the morning, afternoon, or both. And I do actually give you lectures in the course. So in the evenings, you'll get lectures on local biology. We also often get lectures from guest speakers. The Churchill Northern Studies Centre is a major research center, and there are many research groups working there. So last year, there was a polar bear group, there was a seal group, there was a shorebird group, there were the Dutch climatology people. So what we do is we also hit them up for guest lectures as well. So as well as spending a lot of time in the field, you get a lot of lectures from me and from local experts on the history and biology of the area. It is a course and you do get a credit for it. So you'll be evaluated by a number of quizzes, presentations, and a project report due after the end of the course. And that project report will be based on a mini project that you do during the course. The way that we do it is in the first week, again, we show you as much as we can of the local biology. Then we give you a few days to formulate a project, collect data, and actually execute it. So your final mark will be based on a combination of these things, quizzes on the site, and ultimately a project that you'll write up and hand in after the course. Summer is a good time to be in Churchill. It's usually nice in late July and August. Mean daily temperatures that time of year around 12 degrees, which is actually a pretty comfortable working environment. But it's really variable. Like a lot of coastal environments, it can shift rapidly. So even in August, it can be close to 0 degrees. It could be close to 30 degrees. So we have to be prepared for a wide range of conditions. It won't be really cold though. We won't get snow. They've never had snow in August. Most days will be cool and fairly pleasant. Expect some rain. It's a rainy environment. And lots of coastal fog, which is what you're looking at here. It's also, again, a site with a lot of biting insects. Mosquitoes, deer flies, black flies. By the end of the summer, they're usually starting to disappear. But certainly last year, they were going strong right until the end of the course. One thing I will say about this course that's a little unusual is that we have some unusual safety issues. Here's one of them. Polar bears are abundant locally and can show up pretty much any time. It's great to see them. It's less nice to see them like we saw these guys wanting to go to the rocks while I was giving a lecture in the field. So these popped up behind me and started rolling around. We do actually carry, well, not you, but your instructors do carry shotguns. We are licensed, we have experience. It does to some extent restrict what you can do in that you can't go out alone. You know, we have to always work in a group. On the positive side, it means that the whole time you're there, you're going to be there with an experienced instructor pretty much continuously through the course. There probably will be some other opportunities during the course as well. You'll get at least one free day in Churchill. So we'll declare one day a town day and you can do whatever you want in town. We actually do get into town more frequently than that. Again, it's about 25 kilometers from the station, but it's not unusual to pass through it. And so if there are any supplies or things you desperately need, we probably can pick them up. Churchill is also a major tourism center, and there are a number of excellent local tour groups. So I often recommend visiting the fort. They have really good river kayak tours. And as I'll show you in a moment, excellent whale tours. Most of these activities aren't covered by the course fee, but they're not terribly expensive and they're easy to arrange. So I do want to say something about costs. Unfortunately, this is an expensive course. That's what happens with field courses. And part of the problem is travel in the Canadian North is really very costly. Fortunately, I can give you some tips and advice on how to actually keep this under control. The basic information is that you do have to pay a standard half course fee, which last year was, you also have to pay for room and board at the study center, which last year was $1,246 for 2 weeks. So they do feed you, they do house you. All I can say about that is for that latitude, that is a dirt cheap price. It's again, expensive to be up there. If you're going to come, you will have to pay a deposit in advance, so be prepared. Last year it was due sometime in June, and maybe earlier this year. And we also let you make your own travel arrangements, so you're responsible for your own airfare. One reason for that is there often are ways of potentially reducing costs there, depending on your own personal situation. Last year, it cost about $550 to fly from here to Winnipeg, although you can occasionally get much cheaper flights than that. The expensive leg is Winnipeg to Churchill, which is costly. But as I'll mention in a minute, there are a couple of ways you can potentially reduce that as well. I'm pleased to say there will be bursaries from the Experiential Learning Office here for eligible U of T students. Last year, everyone who applied for one got one. Their base bursary is $500, but actually they gave us more than that this year. So it's not a enough to pay your fees or anything like that, but at least it helps. And again, they've told me they also will consider higher awards in cases where there's real financial need. So it is worth going to them and talking to them. A few more travel tips. Again, travel in the north is always challenging. Again, you can often get cheap flights to Winnipeg. Actually, at one point this summer, you could fly to Winnipeg for $135, which sadly I didn't do. Comair is more expensive, but there are a couple of ways of cutting costs. Inexplicably, Comair accepts Air Canada air miles and Air Canada frequent flyer miles and air miles at par. They don't give them out, but they accept them. Even more inexplicably, they consider Churchill to be a local flight. It's got to be one of the best deals you can get on air miles. So if you have any frequent flyer miles or air miles stored up, this is a good thing to use them on. Actually, I flew my entire family up there a couple of years ago like this. There also are student fares if you're under 24. I don't know much about them. I do know the website says to contact Comair directly and ask them. But I do know there is a reduced flight if you're or reduced cost if you're under that age. When you book flights, it's good to make them as flexible as possible. It's also good to have at least 3 or 4 hours to connect in Winnipeg. Flights in the north are often delayed. The airlines are pretty good about it, but the more flexibility you can give yourself, the better. You can also take the train. If you take the train from Winnipeg, you can save about $1,000 on travel costs. But there are a couple of catches. One is that it's a major time commitment. Again, 44 hours over 3 days. They leave late one evening and arrive early in the morning 2 days later. The other cost is that's the price for a seat. If you actually want a bed, it costs you quite a bit more. So you can actually get a berth if you pay more for it. On the other hand, if you're really strapped for cash and don't mind sitting in a seat for a couple of days, it's a way to do it. We had students do this last year. We always do. And actually, it's a really interesting trip. There are actually other more spectacular ways of cutting costs if you're really adventurous. But again, you can't drive to Winnipeg, but you can drive to Churchill, but you can get close. We actually have students drive a major leg of the trip and then get a flight from there. Again, if you're doing travel planning, you might want to talk to me and I can give you more advice. Enrollment will be sometime in the spring semester. They haven't announced enrollment dates yet, but you won't be able to enroll until the spring. We keep the prerequisites pretty open. We really want people to be able to take this course. So, well, you can read them for yourself there. Basically, you have to be a student in biology or some kind of allied discipline. And that's pretty much it. Enrollment won't be directly through Acorn. Instead, what we'll do is set up a web page where you can submit an application. We do ask for your CV and a little bit more information, partly so that we can get some idea of who you are and whether you're really prepared for this kind of experience. Again, we aren't especially exacting, but it is nice to know if you've had any kind of experience in outdoor areas or that kind of thing. And again, the contacts will make this available somewhere. The best thing to do with questions is contact me directly. We're in the early stages of planning next year's field course, and I can give you more information as time goes on. For questions relating to actual registration and enrollment, you should talk to Diane Mathias in the biology department. So she handles the enrollment issues. I handle actually delivering the course. So I hope that some of you or all of you who are listening can make it. We're currently reserving spaces for 10 students. We can bump that up if we need to. It won't be a huge course, but it'll be a very good course and a very intense course. That's also a pretty dry talk. So I'm going to finish off with just a few photos of some of the things that we've seen in the last couple of years to give you an idea of what you actually see during the course. This is part of the Churchill Studies Centre. As if the experience wasn't weird enough already, the study center is built at the site of an old experimental rocket launch site. So you're surrounded by buildings like this. I don't know what to say about that, other than sometimes you wake up and look out the window in the morning and say, what planet am I on again? I'm actually a plant biologist, so I love plants. This is Areophorum or cotton grass. It's a typical Arctic wetland plant, really an iconic plant. Very important food for geese, among other things. We see tons of eagles up there, mostly balds. You see them sitting on the coastal tundra. It's a bit odd seeing an eagle sitting on the ground, but they're there. You got a high probability of northern lights. There are northern lights in Churchill basically every night. The two catches are, you have to have a clear night and you have to go out late, because even by the end of the course, skies are still going to be bright until what, 10:30 at night or something like that. But if you do want to go out at midnight or 1 in the morning, you're really likely to encounter this kind of thing. Aside from polar bears, actually, one of the reasons people go to Churchill is for northern lights viewing. People usually go in the middle of winter. We're a bit early, but believe me, they're there. Just another nice local plant. That's actually an orchid, ladies' tresses, Spiranthes romanzophiana. These are snow geese. This is something I've actually worked with. I spent a big chunk of my career working on interactions between snow geese and the plants that they eat. They don't nest around the study center, but they nest not too far to the east of there. And in late summer, we start getting family groups like this wandering in, eating the cotton grass, doing whatever geese do. If you come on the course, you're going to get a lecture devoted entirely to these birds. Like I say, they're one of the things that I've worked on myself. They're an Arctic nesting goose. This is an Arctic fox. We saw a bunch of them this year. As you may know, Arctic foxes in winter are white, but in summer they adopt this brown plumage. They can be really hard to spot. And all I can say is this year we saw a bunch of them. I think there were a bunch of active dens close to the study center. So another iconic Arctic animal. It's actually a contact zone between Arctic foxes and red foxes, the fox that you get down here. And in fact, there's sort of an ongoing war between the two going on. Churchill is a big center for fox research, both Arctic and red fox. And I think there's a pretty good chance we'll get a researcher to talk about this while we're up there as well. That's on the road just outside the study center. Not terribly good shot of Pacific loon. These are Arctic nesting loons. You may have encountered common loon in northern Ontario here. That's a southern bird. These are the northern ones. Again, very common around the study center. You'll see them here sometimes in migration, but they're really an Arctic bird. Willow ptarmigan, the chicken of the north. In spring, these are everywhere. They really are about chicken sized. They have an absolutely hilarious territorial call. I recommend you Google it. Harder to see later in the summer, but again, they're there. So again, this is an Arctic, again, an iconic Arctic grouse, really common around the study center. These are beluga whales in the river. So every white dot there is a whale. Typically in late summer when we're there, there are going to be several hundred whales in the river mouth. Frankly, the one piece of wildlife I think I can guarantee you is beluga whales. Barring major disaster, there'll be hundreds of them in the river mouth while we're there. You'll get a chance to see them, and if you want, you potentially can go on a whale tour. Just coastal tundra. This is an example of the really good quality tundra that's around the study center. Again, this site is right on the tree line. There are lots of spruce in the area, but headlands have really typical Arctic tundra, the kind of thing that you find through much of southern Nunavut, even central Nunavut in Quebec. And again, it is a contact zone. So there also are taiga areas or boreal forest areas like this that are accessible to us. Really different environment. We spend a lot of time talking about the transition from one to another. Oh, this is a permafrost photo. The sort of The foreground there with the sort of blotchy ground surface, that's a pulsa. And pulsas are permafrost cored mounds that develop in wetland areas. So in fact, most of the landscape through here and through the center is permafrost invading a wet forest. That's a Hudsonian godwit. These are really an odd shorebird. They nest locally. It's one of the strongholds for them. This is a very rare bird. There are only about 50,000 of them total in the world. A substantial number of them nest around Churchill. Hopefully we'll see them over there. Godwits are also famous because they're long distance migrants. These guys fly to, I think, South America, but the really famous one is bar-tailed godwit in Alaska. They recently had one fly nonstop to Australia. And finally, these guys. Again, I don't guarantee them, but there's a pretty good chance we will encounter them, and believe me, they'll structure what we do. These two are basically standing in one of our experiments. They popped out of the bushes. There's actually another cub hiding back in there as well. Again, Churchill is really currently a stronghold for polar bears in the summer.